in this session we will be solving the NET paper for psychology. We will be solving the paper 2 first. Paper 2 has 50 questions, so we will be solving it in 2 sets, 25 questions each. So this is the first set of paper 2. Now before we start solving the papers, there are few things to note about this paper. First of all, there were numerous questions on these two topics. First is intelligence and second is attitude. And most of the questions on these topics were conceptual based. So if you are very clear about these topics, you can score pretty well in paper 2, especially for July 2016. So questions related to research aptitude or research methodologies, I could say, were there, and these questions were highly conceptual. Okay, now let's start with the first question. Now first question is based on the definition of what is chaining is. Under learning we study chaining, and chaining is a procedure that establishes a sequence of response which lead to reward following a final outcome. So this is what is the definition of chaining. So this question was a kind of very direct question. Next question is based on attitude scales. Now under attitude scales you have it is given that there are 11 statements that are there, and how many pair of attitude statements can be formed. So there is a direct formula to understand this. When we will cover attitude, we will see this in detail. So where n is 11, you can simply say it would be 11 minus 1 by 2, that's 11 into 10 by 2, that's 11 into 5, so answer would be 55. Next question, who attempted to describe personality traits in terms of lexicon descriptors? Now Alport and Godbert were the first to describe personality in terms of lexicon descriptors. Now what are lexicon descriptors? Lexicon descriptors explains that all important elements of the personality are reflected by the language when you communicate, and this is how we used to describe people. So lexicon descriptor basically focuses on role of language, and this concept was given by Alport and Godbert. Next question. This is a question on learning again. You have the concept of classical conditioning. So when we understand the experiment of Pavlov, we see there is the first, or I could say the essential element which explains the classical conditioning, and it is that the unconditioned stimulus. Let's replace these words by the exact meaning. So you have, let's take the Pavlov example and substitute the word here. So you have food, that is unconditional stimuli, and bell, which is a conditional stimuli. So classical conditioning is quicker if you have food that is presented immediately after the bell rings. So that is a correct statement. Now the people of cognitive perspective explain that classical conditioning occurs because bell provides an expectancy or an idea of the upcoming food. So if there is the gap between unconditioned stimulus and conditioned stimulus, that is less, the expectancy would be higher, and as the gap increases, the expectancy would tend to reduce. Now when Pavlov first did his experiment, he did not introduce bell. He had a door there that used to make a quacking sound, and that sound prompted the dog that he is about to be given food. And with that quacking sound of the door, Pavlov was able to understand that bell, if provided, would nicely correlate with this. So bell would provide an expectancy of the upcoming food, or the upcoming unconditioned stimulus, we can say. So you have both the assertion and reason which are correct, and reason correctly explains the assertion. Next question. Which of the following have been explained by Freud in his psychoanalytical theory of motivation? So Freud in his psychoanalytical theory explains the life instincts and the death instincts. So we definitely know you have instincts here. Now that is something that most of you were able to do it correctly. So you have instincts, you have eros and thanatos, the life instincts and the death instincts. The next is hedonism which is a base for the concept of id, ego and superego. So under id, it follows the pleasure principle, and what he tried to explain under hedonism was the pleasure feeling or the phenomena associated to pleasure, and finally homeostasis, that is trying to maintain the balance. So A, C and D are the correct choices. So you have A, C and D, that's B would be the correct answer in this case. Next question. Now this question is a simple matching of a concept with its definition. So you have trait. By definition I can say it is a consistent pattern of emotional and behavioral reaction that a person displays across various situations. However, type is a kind of enduring disposition of quality. You have system, which is a collection of many traits and dispositions which determine the personality integration, and finally temperament is a specific behavior of a person that are thought to be biological. So the answer would be 4, 3, 2, 1. That would be D. Next question. This is a question directly based on the sequence of the memory model. So first of all, what you do is you encode the memory. So when you have something, some information that is coming up, you try to encode it, then you try to store it, and when required you try to retrieve it or bring it back. So you have encoding, storage and retrieval would be the correct sequence. Next is, which of the following does not contribute to the memory? Now if a material is interesting, or I have interest in say certain subjects, say for example psychology, I would be retaining the concepts of psychology much quicker as compared to other subjects. So whether a subject is interesting or disinteresting would definitely affect my memory on that subject. My goal behind learning, how motivated I am to learn, would affect my level of learning, or level of retention or memory. And if I am taking learning breaks, that would enhance the memory. The only thing that does not contribute to memory would be gender. Next is, in terms of efficiency of scanning of information, which of the following strategies is considered best? Now this is a question related to concept attainment. We will take a separate class where we will understand the 4 types of concept attainments. We have broad classification into 2, that's focus and scanning. So there are 2 methods broadly. You have focusing and scanning. Under focusing you have conservative focusing and focus gambling. Under scanning you have simultaneous scanning and successive scanning. So for this the answer would be conservative focusing. Now conservative focusing is a method which requires less thinking. It is very efficient as compared to simultaneous scanning, which is another one which we consider close by. And what is the basic aim under conservative focusing is, if I am given certain cards and I am asked to form concepts, what would happen if there is say a grey square and a red circle, okay, and I am made to form a concept based on this, then this would be my primary focus. So I will collect all positive instances related to this, and then I will start deducing my concept further. So that is how you learn concept. So that was a theory which includes these 4 types. We will be covering these in a separate session when we will be covering all the concept attainment and its types. Now next question, retrograde amnesia. There are 2 types of amnesia, retrograde and prograde. So you have retrograde where you forget the previously recalled material. So if you have a point of trauma, I can say here, all things that I learned prior to the trauma are forgotten in this case, and the retrograde amnesia would say all the new acquired things are forgotten. So you have a problem of recalling previously learned material in case of retrograde amnesia. Next question, extrovert individuals are sociable, impulsive and like excitement. That's correct. Why does this happen? This happens due to the neural changes, or the brain of extroverts react with excitement by approaching the environment. And how does this happen? This happens due to the difference in the dopamine, and due to the difference in the dopamine you have amygdala that gets stimulated, and this stimulation is higher in case of extroverts. So this reason correctly explains why extroverts are more impulsive and more excited as compared to introverts. So both the statements are correct and reason correctly explains the assertion. Next question. Now this is again a question based on general definition. So personality structure explains the stable qualities that define individual and distinguish it from other individuals. That's what is the basic personality structure is. Then you have the personality process, that is a psychological reaction and motive that change dynamically over brief periods of time. Personality development talks about how and why each individual comes up as a unique individual. And finally you have psychopathology and change that talks about why people change and why some people resist to change. So these are the correct match. So you have 2, 1, 4 and 3. So you have 2, 1, 4 and 3. So C would be the correct answer here. Next question. Now this question is again related to concept attainment. So you have various types of concepts. Certain concepts are artificial while certain are natural. When I say artificial concept, what does it mean? You have a predefined set of rules based on which you are trying to make a concept. For example, you are trying to understand quadratic formula on a predefined set of concepts that you have or set of rules that you follow. So that is what is artificial concept. However, natural concept is something that is inborn to you or it comes out automatically. You do not have anything specific related to it which is a knowledge. Okay. So that is what is a natural concept. Then you have visual image. Visual image is a representation of the object of the world, and you have prototype as the clearest object that is given in the physical world. So for example, if I say what would be a prototype of a bird, I can say sparrow would be a good prototype of a bird. What I am trying to do is I am trying to understand a clearest object that exists in the real world, and based on that I am trying to explain my answer. So that would be what is prototype. Next question. Master and Johnson gave the sequence and that sequence was B. So you have the direct sequence that you need to remember here. So this was a kind of very direct question. Now this is a question related to stress and performance. So the Yerkin's curve based on stress and performance showed a kind of bell-shaped curve, and the middle portion of the curve was the region where they showed the best performance. So the answer would be B. Next question. Lesions of the ventromedial nuclei of hypothalamus produce. Now what would be the correct answer here? What we are trying to understand here is this ventromedial nuclei of hypothalamus is also known as the satiety center or the hunger satisfaction center. So if it is stimulated, what would happen? If it is stimulated, I would stop eating or there would be cessation of eating if it is stimulated. However, if there is a lesion that occurs over it, what would happen? I would feel more hunger. So there would be increased appetite, and that increased appetite would lead to weight gain, and that would be obesity. Next question. Now these are the various attitude scales and the various methods that you use for the attitude scales. Gutman gave the scaleogram technique, and under this scaleogram technique he talked about the unidimensionality factor and he computed the coefficient of reproducibility. That is one thing that he did under this. The next is paired comparison. So paired comparison talked about the comparison or computing of the Z scores. Then you have the equal appearing interval. Equal appearing interval was given by Thurston, and he talked about computing median as well as the interquartile range. And finally you have summated rating that talked about the item remainder correlations. So you have the correct match as 2, 3, 1 and 4. So 2, 3, 1 and 4 would be the correct answer here. Next question. When the action potential reaches the end of axon terminal, when we talked about neurotransmitters, we understood this clearly that when you have the action potential that reaches the end of the neuron or the terminal of the axon, what would happen? The neurotransmitter either excite or inhibit the next ball that is in line. So that neurotransmitter would affect or excite or inhibit the next ball in sequence. So D would be the correct answer here. Next question. Freud characterized instincts, and these four are the characteristics he gave, or he explained instinct as a source in some bodily defect. It aims with an aim that it focuses on gratification of the need. It is an impetus that propels the person to act, and an object through which instinct achieves its aim. So all these are the characteristics of instinct. So you have all A, B, C and D that are correct. Now next question is on the Guilford's intelligence model as compared to the Thurston's primary mental abilities. So Thurston's primary mental ability divided the mental ability into groups. So say for example you have the verbal ability, you have the spatial ability and so on and so forth. So this classification was very simple as compared to the Guilford classification. Guilford tried to explain based on the cubic model that he propounded, and he gave the structure of intelligence. He classified the product operations and so on, and gave numerous factors for it. So in all he gave 180 factors, out of which you had 85 second order factors and 16 third order factors and so on and so forth. Again he explained since there are so many factors, it is difficult to name all the factors and ability, and he obtained these factors mainly not by interdependence but due to relation between these factors. Since you have so many factors, each factor, so say for example you have the semantic factor, and this semantic factor would be related to evaluation. So each factor is related to other factor and they are not independent, I can say. So you have all A, B, C and D as the correct options here. Next question. Now this passage explains about AIDS, and what is asked is the final statement says that among all type of people who are suffering from AIDS, there is decrease in the T lymphocytes that occur. Now this explains that you are coming to a general conclusion from the specific cases that you are studying. So this approach would be by nature an inductive approach, because you are moving from specific things that these people have such factors, these people have such factors, and finally leading to a conclusion, a generalized conclusion that all people who are suffering from AIDS would have decrease in T lymphocytes. So this would be an example of inductive reasoning. Next question. Now this question again directly matches the definition to the concept. So you have the four concepts related to memory and learning which are given here. The first is reintegrative memory, that checks the details of the recovery of events that happened in the person's past. So that is what is reintegrative memory. You are trying to reintegrate the things that happened in the past. The next is recall. You are trying to learn something that happened in the past. So activity of some performance that has been learned in the past. Recognition, that means you are trying to create familiarity between the two things. For example, I feel that I have met this person somewhere. So what you are trying to do is you are trying to recognize it. So you are trying to generate familiarity. And finally is relearning. Relearning means if there is some residue that is left, you are trying to learn again from that happened in the past. So the correct option would be 4, 3, 1 and 2. So 4, 3, 1 and 2 would be the correct option, that's A. Next question. Now this is a direct question on computation of IQ. So by the simple formula that Binet explained, you have intelligence quotient as mental age by chronological age, that is the real age, into 100. So in this case mental age is 20 and the real age is 40. So you can directly calculate it and answer comes to be 50. So the IQ in this case would be 50. Now what is Muller-Lyer illusion? Muller-Lyer illusion explains that you have two arrows here. Now by visualizing this arrow, one can say this arrow appears to be longer as compared to this arrow. However, it's just because of the corners that the thing is being distracted because the original length or the original height, if I match, is equal for both, but just it's the shape that is distorting. For example, if I have a figure of a house that is being drawn, if I have such a figure that is drawn that shows a smaller house in compared to a figure that shows house in this pattern would give you a bigger look of the house. So what is important is to understand the illusion, the key aspect here is corners, and when we talk about corners, we can say those people who are living in rounded hut or circular huts, or any tribal, let's say any tribal people who are living in circular huts, they won't ever suffer from Muller-Lyer illusion. It is because of the concept of corners that lead to Muller-Lyer illusion. So the correct answer here would be rectangular and square buildings. The only thing that the examiner is trying to focus on or to confuse here is whether a student understands that Muller-Lyer illusion. What we need to understand is the concept of corners. So people living with few corners would be automatically incorrect, and if there is open space, you won't have any corners, so there is no point. And finally, people living in caves, so it does not make any sense. Next question. According to the classical conditioning theory, classical test theory. Now let's understand first what is the classical test theory. Under classical test theory, what was explained was that the observed score would be the result of true score plus error variance, and this error can be either random or non-random. If it is random, it would lead to reliability or it would affect reliability. Sorry, if it is non-random, it would affect validity. That's the first thing that we can say. Now once you have the observed score is a result of true score plus error score, I can say the square of variance of the observed score would be equal to square of variance of the true score plus square of variance of the error score. Since I know this, I can calculate reliability, and once I solve it, I can say reliability would be square of true variance by square of observed variance, or 1 minus square of error variance divided by square of observed variance. So with this, I have the formula for reliability, and the assertion says this: the classical test theory, reliability can be conceptualized as the ratio of true score variance to the observed score variance. That is very correct. Again, it says that the random error of the measurement is assumed to be uncorrelated with the true score, and that can happen only when the random score is uncorrelated with the true score, because once it is correlated, it would affect the result and there would be change in the reliability score. So here I can directly say, if you have the change in the error variance that is here, that would directly affect the reliability. So if the error variance is say 0, I would have reliability of 1, but if this error variance comes up to be 20%, I would have a reliability of only 0.8. So you have this reason that correctly explains the assertion. So I can say both are correct and reason correctly explains the assertion. So with this, we covered the set of first 25 questions for Psychology Paper 2 July 2016 NET examination. We will be covering the next set of 25 questions in the next class. You can subscribe to our channel for any further updates. Have a good day ahead.